Superintendent Prescod, good morning.
Good morning, Sister Karen.
And how are you?
I'm quite well, thanks.
So we're getting ready, we're counting down for Convention 2023. And last year you and I sat in the comfort of your home and we chatted about the calendar, the Christian calendar and the different seasons. Today I brought you into the sunlight and we are in the open air enjoying God's blessings. Let us be thankful for that.
Indeed.
Nice blue sea behind you and the busyness of the street below you. So those of you who are viewing this will have to guess our location. We will disclose it later. But we're briefly going to touch on keeping documents in the church, Reverend, because it has come to my attention and I am a bit concerned about our legacy. We're talking, we're going to celebrate, yesterday, well, we celebrated or noted that John Wesley was converted on the 24th of May, 1738. And convention centers a little around, it's always on the Monday after Pentecost Sunday. So are you going to associate the conversion of John Wesley as a Pentecost experience? We have that as a document that he was converted. Can we document this year in the Methodist circuit that is a conversion, his conversion was like a Pentecost experience? And then we would talk also on the paperwork that we have in the church, how the administration is run, and how we document those things so that 20 years from now, somebody reading in the church, you were the superintendent at this time. And for instance, the most important upheaval, I would think, in your superintendency is the COVID-19. That was, I would think that was the most challenging. So do we have good documentation on that and so on? So share with us the importance of documentation in the church and the life of the work that we are doing here in this circuit, please.
Indeed, I think the question of documentation is an extremely important and critical one, not just for the life of the church, but for every aspect of society. I think even John Wesley, as you referred to, he would have written in his journals, and I think it's his journal information that he was able to draw on, and we are able to draw on to recall his experience on the 24th of May 1738. And even in our own experiences as individuals, we recognize from time to time the importance of documentation and what having written documentation means, that we can go back later and draw on, because our mind as individuals is limited, and as we age, we really and truly our mind, we really forget things. And with our failing memory and with failing human capacity to remember, we really need documentation to assist us, to help us in keeping a lot of the important information that we have about ourselves and about the church and about our lives in general, so that succeeding generations can really recall the journey of faith and our journey, and how our journey sometimes is connected to theirs.
Well, you see, as you say that, I just thought 1738, 24th of May. And Charles was the 22nd of May, I think. He was 2 days before. And you know, the more I read about these documentations, I'm just wondering, are we really sure that it was on that day?
Well,
I mean, John Wesley says that the time also.
Right. Well, he really gives the day and the time in his journal.
Definitely so.
Definitely, and I think that is what really gives some kind of credence to the information that we have, in that it is his words, not necessarily ours. And this also points back, I believe, to the importance of documentation, because even in other cases with other records, sometimes we might be able to go back and look at information and give an approximate time. But when you have someone stating the exact
Exactly.
time.
Yes,
It
yes.
gives us something more that we can hold on to with a lot more certainty. It gives credibility to our own information.
So do we know if Charles left anything at all? Did Charles leave anything apart from his hymns? Did he document anything?
Well, I am sure he would have. However, one of the things I believe is that the church has focused on John Wesley a lot more than
Yes.
Charles, in a sense.
And why is that, Reverend? Because, you know, in always researching and I'm looking up, it is interesting that recently I bounced up something on the website, on Google in searching. It's interesting, eh? Charles had a group of people that they used to do this prayer in the morning.
Oh, right.
Ended. And they used to meet, and then John joined them, or was it Charles invited John?
Charles
From
invited,
from the time John joined, there was order and regularity, and the writer on the website says that John brought order, for want of another word, and the group grew, and that is when they got this name Method. Right. The people who did it so methodically. Well, I don't know if we do things methodically. Yes, Charles started the group, John joins, he brings order. Charles first is converted, and then John. But we hear more of John. Is it because John wrote a journal and we don't know if Charles wrote one, but we sing all his hymns?
Right. I am not sure it might be that alone, but I believe that the church has focused more on John, perhaps because of his contribution in terms of how we view ministry, I think.
So Charles was
all
not
the
a
music
minister?
was important, yes, but I think John's importance to ministry has to do with his own preaching, his own articulation of his own faith.
And he was the
in
one
a
who
lot of
went
ways.
out and
Right,
reached
yeah.
out to the people.
Right, and his own
What
missionary
was Charles
work.
was just writing hymns then?
Well, I think Charles would have participated, yes, but I believe that because of John's contribution to the life of the church might have been, I don't want to say it's more significant, but I think it's more in, it would have been more of what I would call, what we would term as mainstream church mission and ministry in that sense. Because Charles's impact on music, and I think we read, sometimes we sing some of the hymns, and they really are one, not just about the not just about music, but there's some important testimonious theology that is really in the hymn. So I think although John might have been able to write those in his own sermons, I think Charles was able to do those in the music.
Okay.
So I think both of them.
So it's a good balance.
So it would have provided a good balance.
Yeah. Okay. So when we come down now to our documentation of the founders, I would now call it a joint founding. John and Charles. I'm not leaving out Charles today.
Okay, great.
But the movement grew, and we are here today under the umbrella of MCCA, Methodist in the Caribbean.
Methodist Church in the Caribbean and the Americas.
And the Americas, yes. So, and that came about in 1967.
Well, go ahead, sorry. Yeah.
So we have been having convention here in Grenada since 1964. From your experience since you've been here, have you seen anything concrete in the records as to why we had convention, why it was called convention? Because it has always been around Pentecost Monday, Whit Monday.
Okay, so I think that goes back again to the subject that we are discussing, documentation, because I think in my sojourn here, I have not really been able to come across any real documents. Maybe they are there, but I have not been able to locate or been able to come into contact with them to say why we have this convention or why we are having it at this specific time. You know, so I don't have that information in terms of documentation.
But in talking to the older heads, what they tell you? What are the stories?
Well, I know.
Part of that is that documentation too.
I can't fully recall now at the time, but it would have started by, what was his name, Reverend? Was it Dean?
Patterson Dean, yes,
Patterson Dean.
but it was during his tenure here,
During his
yes.
tenure here. Interestingly, I think and I think Grenada is quite unique in the sense that in most of the islands, in St. Vincent, around this time, more congregations focus on Aldersgate itself. We would have somewhat of a kind of activity where all the churches in particular circuits would come together to mark Aldersgate. But what I find unique in Grenada is that it's not that we don't focus on Aldersgate, but the Whit Monday experience is a little bit different, whereas the experience is not exclusively Wesley, but I mean more it's on the conversion of John Wesley, which is on May 24th, or Aldersgate Sunday. We are having a convention on Whit Monday, which is more, I think, a week after, which seems to center more on the whole idea of Pentecost and the outpouring of the Holy Spirit on the life of the church.
What I have come across, and you know I always have something old, I have come across a magazine that was published. I don't have it here with me, but I could show it to you. It does not have a date, but I do know that is it Dr. Mitchell, who was the president at the time of the South Caribbean district president, and Reverend Patterson Dean was the minister here. There's a magazine showing different aspects of the church, but centering more on stewardship. So I started to wonder if he really wanted to boost the stewardship of the church when he brought convention in. For instance, I don't know if you have ever heard of Reverend Ponce.
Right. Well, right.
Right.
So probably would have worked in
So,
St. Vincent as well.
yeah, you worked with
It
him?
might have been. I'm not
Okay. Well, Ponce was here later in the 80s. I was not here at the time. And he introduced another circuit event, which they used to call the Circuit Fair,
Right.
which was around Independence time. Now, whether it was a nice way of getting the circuit together to raise funds, because basically it was raising funds. They met together and it was in the park right after the Independence rally. Then people will come across to Wesley College and then you have a whole day fair. I do not know if in '64 when Reverend Patterson Dean introduced this thing, and as I tell you about the magazine, if the stewardship thing, you know.
Okay, right. Okay.
But I know it has always been to get the circuits together, because this is just one circuit.
Right.
You refer to St. Vincent just now, which has how many circuits?
2 circuits.
2 circuits. Now, how many congregations make up a circuit? That's a bit of documentation we need to know.
Well, I think it's not really based on the congregation. I think it's more of a location, because in St. Vincent there are 2 circuits, and I believe that one circuit has about 16 churches and the other one may have about maybe 8 or 9 or thereabouts.
16 congregations, remember?
Yes. So, and in other circuits, there, even in Jamaica where I work, there are some circuits with quite, I can't remember, you might find one circuit might have 3 or 4 congregations, and you might have another circuit have as many, more than 10. Let me just put it that way.
So there is no limit to a circuit?
Not necessarily, no.
Oh, okay then, all right. Well, you have not been able to find any documentation, any written documentation
Right.
as we have of Wesley. So we don't have that, but we do know that this happens. And so it is alleged that this year is the 60th event if we count 1964 as the first. In the Bible, we speak of numbers. There are numbers. How significant are numbers for a Christian in their marking an event or an anniversary? They have 7 days to make the first
Completion.
yes, and the 7th day Christ rested, and that's when we fellowship. And then we have, I don't know what is the next one. It's the next one.
Well, it's 40.
The 40 days in the wilderness. And I've heard of 66 or 666, I'm not sure. So just give us a little rundown of the importance for the numbers so that we know.
I think numbers is some important symbolism, I think, in the Bible. And
Okay.
and I think one of the things about these things is that different people give different interpretations of what these numbers mean. You have articulated a number of them, 7, which is kind of a number of completion, and we see that in the 7-day order of creation that is in Genesis chapter 1. And then we have also in the sabbatical year, it was 7 every 7th year, or 7 years by 7 years, and the 50th year would have been the year of the Jubilee when slaves and so on were freed and so on. So 7 is an important key and an important number of completion as well. Also 40, and you talk, 40 is another one, and you have a number of, which is perhaps the more important one of the. I think 40, the number 40 perhaps is in the Bible at least close to 150 times. And 60 again is a number which it's a kind of number which I read kind of celebrates the last not section, or when a person is entering the last phase of their life, or something like that. I mean, we talk about God gave people
3 score
and 10.
But there's some people who argue that it's not just 3 score, you have to add in the 10.
Right.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think biblically, there was, I think in somewhere in Acts, I think it is, Paul talks about, he tells Timothy that widows under 60, you should not support them. And the idea is that when somebody passed the age of 60, they were unable to take care of themselves and so on. So society really would take care of them in that sense. Also.
So what the plus 10 mean then?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
And then.
Because it's 3 score and 10. Yes. Okay. Sorry.
Well, maybe when you reach there, maybe that is seen to be, you're coming to the end of, your life and so on. Although in time now we see that people are living much longer than that, and even there was a time yesterday we were doing a Bible study where we were looking at some of the older people in the Bible, like I think some of those, like the patriarchs, they would have grown up to 500, 300 and so on years, hundreds
and Moses,
of years.
How many years
Moses was how much? I can't remember offhand, but I know the oldest person would have, Methuselah would have been about 960 years or thereabout. So I mean, we have that kind, over time, ages and those kind of things would have had different significance, So
really and truly, in a nutshell, the 7 is important, and the 40 is important, and after that.
I think 60 people can find. I think most things. I think
more
even
commercial.
3 sometimes. I think people can find different numbers. I think there might be others. And I'm sure if we do research, we will find that people will connect a lot of different meaning to different numbers in the Bible, 50, 60, 30, 3, and so on. Things like that.
Yeah, because Jesus Christ died at the age of 33.
Yeah.
But he didn't start his ministry at 30.
30, right. And interestingly, I was reading something the other day, and it was, and there was an important question where people were, I was reading about the early church. There was this discussion about what the resurrected body would look like when somebody is resurrected, and one of the things that the early church discussed was that they said that when people are resurrected, they would look like 30 years of their age, because that is the year that Jesus, or around 30, because that is when Jesus really died. So there was those kind of discussions.
So if I die now,
I'm not saying it's right, but I'm thinking that.
Well, I'm just asking. If I die now and I'm resurrected, I look 30 years younger?
Well, that was the discussion that was going on.
That's good then. But when we rise to glory, that's probably what really happens in truth.
Well, I don't
Nobody
know.
has ever come back to tell us,
Right.
Nobody has ever come back to tell us.
But it's something that I would have found in my own.
So any message you want to give us, Reverend, for this year's convention, being your 5th convention with us?
Well, I think sustainability, I think one is important because to be able to start anything is good, but to sustain it for 60 years means a lot more, means that there must be something that is meaningful over those 60 years that we can because I'm sure that there are a number of persons who belong to the church who would have died in those 60 years, come up and gone. And even maybe when we are gone, the rally might still be going on. And so to be able to have the rally over 60 years with people coming and going is an important achievement within itself. Also, I believe the second thing is that I believe even as time changed, and I think you articulated the whole point about when Ponce was here, he had they used to have this fundraising activity and circuit fair. And I think over the years, one of the things that we can do in these things is how do we move with the time? How and I think this is important for this particular event, because I mean, how are we able to sustain it and make it hold meaning for people over 60 years? And I think that means that how do we move with the time and become relevant? I think that is the word that I would want to use. So I think that is important. And the third thing, I think the whole question of documentation, I think it's important that we are able to keep these documents alive to see where we have how far we have come as a church. And I think so maybe 60 years from now, the children, grandchildren of
great
might be able to look back at this interview and when we are gone, and it might hold some kind of meaning or inspire or spark something in them to do something that is important in the life of the church. So I think from those perspectives, I think it is those are some thoughts I would like to leave with us. Also to encourage us as a church in general to come out to the activity and try to because I speak to people from time to time as I visit, especially I when I'm doing visitation among the elderly persons too. They would say that they used to have 6 buses from Constantine and so on, and they are able to recall all these things. And I don't think that is maybe something we don't have now in terms of the rally, that kind of turnout. But how can we reach out to the younger generation and help them to see the importance of such activities in the life of the church? So I just want to encourage us to come and give support and so on as much as we can to the activity, because I think it's meaningful for us as individuals and as a church to be able to celebrate these important activities in our own experience and in our lives. All right.
Thank you, Reverend, for sitting with me today in the sun. We are located in the back yard of the Presbyterian Church overlooking the harbor. If you see over Reverend's shoulder, there is a jetty for the tourist boat. And Reverend, you have sat in the sun, and I want to thank you for doing that while I have done half sun and half shade. Happy Pentecost to you.
Thank you so much, and I trust that person's viewing thank you so much, and I trust that person's viewing will find the presentation interesting and meaningful and helpful, most important.
Amen.
God bless. Thank you.
Amen.